The wine in my father's glass caught the light as he laughed, dismissing the thought as if it were trivial. "She's just a soldier," he said, voice smooth. "Don't expect much from her." Around the table, polite chuckles bubbled up, the kind that acknowledge authority without challenging it. Everyone had learned to nod when my father spoke. Then the young man next to him, freshly groomed, tailored confidence still neat from the dry cleaner, cleared his throat. A small, measured smile touched his lips. "Funny," he said. "Last week, she signed off on my promotion." Forks froze midair, chairs creaked, and suddenly all eyes found me, as if the table had known me long before my father did. Thanksgiving smells of roasted turkey, buttered sage, and warm wood filled the house. The football game hummed faintly in the den, more backdrop than entertainment. The table stretched long, a borrowed relic braced with books beneath its folding legs, its cloth pressed with careful hands, place cards leaning like quiet promises. My father sat at the head, shoulders squared, voice calm but commanding. Years of leading had taught him how silence could pull attention. People leaned forward, laughed on cue, nodded at stories, all rehearsed gestures in a room that had long memorized its leader. I sat halfway down, close enough to hear, far enough to remain unnoticed. My plate steamed untouched. My hands rested lightly in my lap, the posture of someone trained to appear calm while counting their breaths. My father talked about small-town politics, the weather, prices that seemed trivial, the room absorbing it all. Then he gestured toward the young man. "This is Ethan," he said. "Commissioned, bright future." A nod, a handshake, a polite smile. And then, almost as an afterthought, he waved toward me. "My daughter," he said. "She enlisted. Works hard, I'm sure, but don't expect much, she's just enlisted." The sound of his laugh struck the table like a dropped plate. Some laughed reflexively, others cleared their throats. My heat rose, but I trained myself to look at the stain on the tablecloth, a vague shape I couldn't name, and wait. I knew the rhythm of these moments. Stay still, it passes, but it didn't. Ethan tilted his head, the polite smile shifting, settling into recognition. He set down his fork and looked at me directly. "Funny," he said softly. "Last week, she approved my promotion." Silence folded over the room, thick as velvet. Chairs halted, the TV seemed to vanish, and the room's attention snapped like a compass finding true north. My father, for the first time that night, looked genuinely surprised. "Is that so?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. I met Ethan's eyes, voice steady. "I serve where I'm assigned," I said. No bravado, no defiance, just truth. A small laugh rippled through the table, uncertain, shifting the rhythm. My father filed the moment away, moving on to safer topics. But the table, I could feel, had changed. I had grown up in a house where rank came before warmth, where silence was both tool and verdict. My father's lessons arrived in corrections, not hugs, in posture, not praise. Discipline was a language I had learned young, precision a form of kindness. When I told him I wanted to enlist, he laughed, dismissive, certain I lacked the constitution, meaning, not strength, but my sex. I mailed my acceptance quietly, letting the papers arrive before the words, and when I finally told him, he nodded once. "We'll discuss it later," he said. We never did. Boot camp stripped names down to tasks, days into routines, hair cut to stubs, voices counted instead of heard. I learned exactness early, time numbers people. I wasn't exceptional, no medals, no speeches, but I noticed what mattered. I signed reviews, watched patterns, accounted for responsibility. Promotions were never prizes, they were shifts in air, changes that affected everyone. I kept a ledger, first mental, then tangible, tracking decisions, questions, and accountability. Quiet authority, I discovered, moves without drama. It doesn't demand recognition, it earns it. Years later, Ethan's file crossed my desk. Solid work, steady growth, mentorship noted, concerns resolved. I signed. The ink held, the ledger was faithful. I didn't know where he would sit at the next Thanksgiving, nor the questions that would be asked, but I knew the process would speak. And it did. That night at the table, when Ethan mentioned my role in his promotion, the room shifted imperceptibly. My father absorbed the word accountability, letting it settle in a house built on hierarchy. The air moved differently. People listened in ways they hadn't before. Dinner passed. Conversations drifted, carefully probing without confrontation. Praise was offered, but I redirected it to process, not people. Ethan and I exchanged quiet nods, recognition in the subtlest gestures. My father, watching, measured the new geometry of respect, of authority no longer tethered solely to him. For the first time, our silence held a shared understanding rather than a punishment. Boundaries and respect took root, unseen but real. Later, alone with coffee, the ledger in hand, I added notes. Names for memory, decisions for accountability, patterns for future reference. Work continued. Promotions, approvals, evaluations, every action a brushstroke in a larger canvas of order. Authority outlives the individual who wields it. The ledger keeps moving, and I move with it. Silence carries weight, honesty speaks without flourish, and the table remembers truth even when voices do not. In the end, the story of that Thanksgiving wasn't about triumph or vengeance. It was stillness, precision, the subtle recalibration of a room that had underestimated me for years. It was a quiet correction, a reminder that competence is its own proof. The room would never be exactly the same again. My father had listened all along. He just hadn't realized which truths mattered until they spoke for themselves. And in that quiet, measured way, revenge, if you wanted to call it that, arrived not with noise, but with undeniable presence. The ledger remains open. Decisions continue. Authority lasts not through force, but through consistency. Names are lighter than work. Actions carry weight beyond recognition. And when the next room waits, the chairs will shift, the air will breathe differently, and those who once underestimated will adjust to a new reality, long before a word is spoken. That is the way of service, of patience, of quiet justice, and of a truth that finally refuses to be ignored.